Well, hello. Hello. Denise Matteau here. And hashtag truth set free. Now, I don't know how much influence I might have had in this, but I do believe that I was certainly not hearing many other people talk about this. Way back in 2019, I started talking about the problem of the Catholic Church, which is not alone in doing this at all. All of the churches, all of the Protestant churches and the public school systems, all of these institutional groups that have had people, predators on their staff who's taken advantage of people under their tutelage, committed crimes, and they've frequently settled out of court. People have been encouraged by others who are kind of complacent about institutional sexual abuse and other forms of abuse. They always say, well, you don't really want to go through a trial, and you don't want to ruin this person just because of this one little issue, and they get them to sign a non-disclosure, knowing that, putting them in the position of knowing that if they don't sign it, it's going to be a hard fight. And when you know as much as people like me know about the Catholic Church from personal experience in it, and I don't have anything to criticize the Catholic faith or Catholic doctrine, okay? I look upon the Church as a human organization that has been as extremely fallible as all other human organizations. But what is Truth Set Free? What is the hashtag all about? What is this all about? Texas just passed a law that yanks the rug out from under pastors, ministers, and others who use all kinds of subterfuge to enforce silence on their victims or on the victims of their colleagues. Texas will not allow anyone to be punished for breaking a non-disclosure agreement that they have signed against a criminal perpetrator, or they have signed with a criminal perpetrator. And this is called Trey's Law because back in 2019, a young man named Trey was up against what my brother was up against: the organized enforcement of NDAs by the churches. Now, I didn't go look at the details of Trey's case. I don't know what denomination he was abused under, but it was some kind of abuse within a church setting. So I don't know if it was Catholic, because it could easily have been anything else. But, yeah, he had signed an NDA, and he was telling his family that he really couldn't even speak to his family. But his sister said he did speak about fear of saying anything to an actual counselor. He could not get therapy for the aftermath of his abuse because of it. And the same thing happened to my brother. And there are people associated with Grim Grizz who are part of that enforcement. Grim Grizz is being promoted by Paul Vanderklay as one of the gatekeepers for the estuary movement. And he is a gatekeeper. He's not just a regular person in that group. I'll tell you why in a minute. But what happened in 2019 in my family, I had at times spoken up. My brother had spoken to me in 1976. He had gone into the St. Edmundite Seminary, the monastery, down on St. Edmund's Island off Mystic, Connecticut. It's an island. The St. Edmundite order is, I'm told it's no longer really, it disbanded. But it ran orphanages in Louisiana and other places. And my brother was inspired to go there. He thought he would become a priest in 1976. He came by my house when my daughter was just a few days old, and he spent the afternoon with her, holding her, and it was a very beautiful afternoon. And then he said he was going now for his 5 weeks retreat on the island before being ordained as a Catholic priest in the Latin Rite Church. And before the end of the summer, she was born on June 17th, 1976. Before the end of the summer, he was a wreck. I mean, he was a total mess. What had happened was the St. Edmundite order had an initiation rite that was basically a homosexual, gay, sexual gauntlet. And therefore, every Catholic priest that came out of the St. Edmundite order, and now they can deny that they're part of it because that order is disbanded, so they probably claim some other title. The few elderly, I guess, retired. I don't know how many it trained after that. But it was, you could not become a St. Edmundite priest unless you had acquiesced to this basically satanic initiation ritual. And that order specialized in running orphanages. Okay? Think about it. So my brother did not acquiesce. He resisted. And they destroyed him. Christmas after that, actually it was a couple of Christmases after, at a family gathering. You know, the thing is, during that period, okay, he was given a lot of money as large settlement to shut up, sign the NDA and take this money. And what happened was, my eldest sister, who really controlled the family in a lot of ways. I mean, I was told to take certain career steps that I refused because she's connected to mafia. And, you know, go ahead and laugh, okay? You think The Sopranos is all fiction? Go to the FBI website, the official government website, and look up mafia history, New England Mafia. You see it all there. All around Massachusetts. Families are connected in based on their ability to provide services of different kinds. And my sister rose in her career based on her connections into the Irish Mafia. So she was basically took on the role of being the watchdog over my little brother. He never, even to this day, he doesn't take a step outside of control of elders in the family. It's like a family cult, but it's how the Catholic Church operates. And I had spoken about it, but what had happened back in the 1970s, okay, this happened in 76, and maybe it was 78 or 79, because my daughter by that time was a toddler, and we were at a family gathering, and he told me what had happened. He told me about the gauntlet. Before getting to that point, I didn't know, nobody knew where all of a sudden he shows up with all this money. He had a sports car, expensive clothing. He was, you know, enjoying things. He was giddy with the money they had showered him with. And he drank it up. He became an alcoholic in rapid succession. Going into the seminary, going through the gauntlet or refusing to go through the gauntlet, being abused, being, you know, the carrot and the stick, given the money but told to he had to keep his mouth shut, couldn't even go into counseling for himself. Now, I was in family counseling because I was trying to deal with these problems in the family, the problem my sister created. And I had married a man who reflected the background of the family somewhat. He wasn't mafia, but he was not right in the head either. And I don't go into talk about that because, I chose to marry him, number one. Number two, when you choose to marry somebody, you know, and I was 19 when I got married, when you choose to marry somebody who reflects your family's problems, it's because that seems normal to you. It's a comfort zone in a strange way. So I had outgrown my idea that that was a comfort zone, because it wasn't. So I was going through the divorce and everything, and he suddenly shows up with all this money, and I was going through family therapy and really just trying to set up. This guy was trying to deal with the whole family. There was court orders ordering other members of the family to attend counseling with me, which they refused. So his role, he said, was just to find a way for me and my daughter to get protection. And I spoke about my brother suddenly appearing with, like, all this money and stuff, how that had happened, you know, back in 76. And then he became an alcoholic, and I knew he couldn't take a step. It was like Renee was keeping him on booze. And actually, I had seen how she did that with her husband. It's not uncommon for the matriarch of a connected family to keep the men under control by keeping them drunk. And I think you see that in many relationships. You have an addict and an enabler. The enabler is usually the controller. And so we were talking about this in family therapy. And that therapist insisted that my brother must have gotten drug money, that I should not attempt to find some way to rebuild my relationship, which I had had with a sane, intelligent young man, brother, but I should write him off as an alcoholic because he probably got all the money from dealing drugs, which was absolutely untrue. And it was part of the network in Massachusetts that is so tight. My sister had visited that therapist's office, had tried to bully him when the court ordered that he try to deal with the whole family, because I had requested some further evaluation on my ex, and my lawyer had said, you can't do that, it's not done. I said, well, why not? You can actually go in and ask the court for almost anything, just they'll say no if you can't, right? And my lawyer didn't want me to do it, so I fired the lawyer. I went in and did it anyway, and I got exactly what I wanted. An order that my ex had to attend, and he did attend a couple of sessions, but then refused to go any further. And my parents were supposed to attend at least an evaluation session of what was going on inside the family. And my sister convinced them, don't go. She had gone to the therapist's office herself, found out what was his intention, which he stated he doesn't intend to diagnose and deal with different family members. He only intended to try to help set up a supportive network for his clients, which were me and my daughter. And she didn't realize that one of the other counselors in there was his wife. And she tried to bully that woman, and then she went directly with him, and she tried to bully him. And he was furious. He told me about it. But at the same time, he did two things that should have cost him his license if I had been aware enough to fight. He told me, as if it were a statement of fact, that the only way my brother could have had that money was he was a drug dealer, which was crazy. I knew my brother. I knew who he hung out with, even when he was drunk. He wasn't in the drug scene. He was a totally Catholic, committed student at St. Michael's College up in Vermont, and he went from there into the St. Edmundite Monastery that used to exist down on St. Edmunds Island. It's now a resort area, spa, whatever. But another thing he did was when my daughter told me something her father was doing that was abusive, he told me, do not try to file a complaint. I should have brought her father up on charges. But that therapist said that he would not support anything that might ruin the man's career. And so I thought I had to deal privately with all of the issues. So that therapist should have lost his license over what he did. But you got to see why he did it. There was partly personal intimidation on the part of a very powerful member of the Mattel family, Remy Burke, executive secretary to Jack Welch at the time, certainly able to cost him his job. Alongside her was her daughter, my niece, Lori Zief, who is now a mental health official in Vermont. Well, she was rising in the Massachusetts hierarchy at that time, and she could be used against anybody. And my sister did use against anyone in the Massachusetts mental health system who might assist a victim. And as I've said before also, Steve Hassan, the Jewish militant, goes to a Reform homosexual synagogue in Boston, famous anti-cult, anti-Trump, anti-cult expert. He actually, under the camouflage of being an anti-cult expert who does interventions which are stalking, harassing unto the point of death. Yes, they harass people to death. And he gets away with it because he's protected by the government as a so-called anti-cult expert, but really he's just doing hit jobs for the mafia. Because all you have to do is call him up, tell him you think your relative is part of a cult, pay him $3,000 at the time that they took money from my brother. My brother was drunk. He was convinced to give him $3,000. The person he gave it to was harassing my daughter. She died of an alleged suicide in 2010, along with her fiancé. 2 weeks before she died, her fiancé died. Both of them alleged suicides. Same method of suicide. Same Stephen Haas staff member, a man who was actually on the books, Brian Birmingham, was involved. There's also a cult group, this is associated with Grim Grizz. There's a cult group called SMART, S-M-A-R-T. I forget exactly how the acronym works out. It's something to do with ritual crime. I'm not quite sure how they got that acronym, but it's founded by Neil Brick. So you put S-M-A-R-T, all caps acronym, comma, Neil Brick, N-E-I-L, B-R-I-C-K. Put that name and that title in search, and you will find all kinds of material. It's a very active organization. It's extremely pseudo-medical, pseudo-psychological. It's a mess, and it is an enforcement arm for the pedomafia, you might call them. Oh, I'm glad that, it is coming to a head that this NDA, Missouri and Texas are 2 states now that have just passed laws that free people from being subject to NDAs. It won't do my brother any good because he lives up north, and he probably doesn't care at this point because all these years they've pretty much destroyed him. He was attacked several times in recent years for trying to speak up in my defense. He helped my daughter get away from Stephen Hass's intervention crew when they jumped her at my sister's house. She went into hiding for 2 years. He actually helped her physically get away from them, and he faced consequences as a result. I've been focusing heavily on the estuary movement. Paul Vanderklay, Jonathan Peychaud, and John Vervaeke are part of it. I'm beginning to understand that Jonathan Peychaud is a bigger part of this estuary cult than I thought. It's really disturbing. And John Vervaeke also. But the reason I've been going after particularly Paul Vanderklay, because he is the organizer of it, every single person that Paul Vanderklay, who is a pastor of a Christian Reformed Church of North America, CRCNA, that's an old traditional Protestant Reformation denomination, harkens back to the Dutch Reform of the colonial days. Paul Vanderklay, as a pastor, is the son of a pastor in the same denomination. So he grew up in that world, which is a very highly educated type of pastor. These are not storefront, the Lord spoke to me and I'm going to tell you, blah, blah, blah. No, he's not one of those. He's a well-educated man. We have every right of expectation that he has discernment when he puts somebody in leadership, and every single person that I've seen him putting in leadership in the internet structure around Estuary is connected to this protection world. Grim Grizz is a Discordian chaos artist, videographer that Paul Vanderklay likes to shove up front. Now, at this point, you can say, well, Denise, you're just running into people you don't like, and you're being mean to them. Like, no. Grim Grizz's actions against me were no accident. I had just started to, as they say, come out of the lurk. I was enjoying the estuary discussion streams, because a lot of them can be interesting. And when I showed up in a chat in Grim Grizz's stream, his first reaction was to attack me. And I wasn't saying anything controversial. I wasn't starting trouble or being rude or anything. But he automatically attacked me on a false pretext because I had said one sentence. I typed one single sentence in his chat. Bishop Robert Barron, is Novus Ordo, which is not an insult. Novus Ordo, all that means is he likes the modern Catholic liturgy, the post-Vatican II Catholic liturgy. If he were not Novus Ordo, we'd be referring to him as a traditional. And that's all I said was, oh, Bishop Barron's Novus Ordo. Grim Grizz was showing some clips at the time. Grim Grizz's automatic reaction was to throw that up on the screen and angrily, looking in the camera with real anger, said, I didn't know what I was talking about. And then to confess that he didn't even know what Novus Ordo meant. He just thought it was something he had to attack me on. I'm thinking, why? Who was I that needed this reaction? Then he puts it in AI. He asks AI a question about it. AI comes back with talking about Bishop Barron being a Novus Ordo bishop, a well-loved Novus. I think he said well-loved Novus Ordo bishop. So Grizz had to admit I was right. So the next thing he does, now there are hundreds. If you put my name, Denise Matteau, into search, you will find dozens at least of all kinds of stupid, bizarre, insulting troll videos with my face and my name in them. So if he had only done that, he could have come up with any kind of ridiculous, stupid thing to put on the screen. He came up with a video that does not come up in search. There are some buried videos from 2019, 6 years ago. He came up with one of them, and he put that one, and that one attaches directly to the mafia-connected trolls. It has my picture on the thumbnail, and it's an interview about some events in 2019. Now, something that was going on in 2019, one of those very trolls that were involved in that had sent me an email claiming that he knew my brother was a defrocked priest who had abused a child, and he was going to tell the world. Which, of course, was not true. My brother was never a priest, and he never harmed anybody. He was the victim of the St. Edmundite initiation rites. But this man, who was one of the leading trolls in Grim Grizz's circle, Grim Grizz speaks about having been in the Isaac Cappy circles around the Famalam, and he went into the question of whether there was pedophile tunnels underneath the Voodoo Donuts. See, that's the other thing. This group, what the Catholic Church does, and the other groups that are with the mafia in enforcing pedophile rings, is they create this circus of pulling all credibility away from any honest look at the crime problem by creating these LARPs, live-action role plays, which Grim Grizz is part of. He is a LARPer. And he speaks about having gotten briefly involved with the Voodoo Donut LARP, only to discover that they were playing him. But he continues to play the game with them, because there he was, confronting a total stranger with no reason. And I hope Paul Vanderklay sees this part of what I have to say. I know he's trying to ignore me because he thinks he's a saint. Yeah, right. So Grim Grizz pulls this unsearchable, obscure video from 6 years ago, which was probably sent to him. There's a guy named McMulfro, something like that, whose whole channel has a bunch of stuff looking like he's Grim Grizz's handler for the Discordians, which Paul Vanderklay runs a Discord. And everyone else. There are other people there who run Discords too. And they're not all aware of it, but I think Paul Vanderklay's aware of it, that the Discord platform, you're inviting people into an ideological or philosophical discussion group. All of the metadata of their equipment, their device, their location, it's all open to the hackers, because Discord was put together by the same hacker group that runs the Cicada 3301 hacker network. The man who sent me that email claiming this false story about my brother, and he carbon copied it to someone who has done time for home invasion, a felon, a convicted felon who had been in prison for 6 years. Okay, these are the kind of people Grim Grizz runs with. And so back in 2019, I got that email, and I straightened that guy out, and it was interesting. We became friends for a little while because I actually convinced myself that I could exit him from that cult, which I was partially successful. But he kept friends in it. And if you're trying to help somebody get away from a cult, it's very difficult. They'll always have 2 or 3 friends that they excuse. They're not really bad. And those people pull him back in, and that's what happened with him. But just the same, I still have that email, including the person to whom it was carbon copied, who is probably somebody that Grim Grizz knows, because they do the same kind of artwork. And they all work with each other for the, these clips and things that Grim Grizz uses. When you start watching that group, you notice they seem to all have access to a similar reservoir of copyright-free clips that they can use. I'm not saying he is, but it makes you wonder when you see such similar style and you know how the system works. There aren't that many copyright-free clip libraries that they have their own copyright. Basically, you're licensed to use their clips in your creations. And so you can notice that some are similar. But anyway, I digress. The issue, the non-disclosure agreements are done. And getting back to why, so Paul VanderKlay promotes Grim Grizz as a gatekeeper, which is exactly what he did with me. Total gatekeeper, working in conjunction with this McMofro troll. Paul VanderKlay promotes a left-wing street violence promoter named Mark D. Parker, who wants to revive the BLM riots. White guy, white liberal, Californian. Paul VanderKlay promotes a sweet, gentle guy named Luke Thompson, who actually is one of the liars, the assigned damage control liars, because now that I've been pointing out that Paul VanderKlay is basically in the role of a ringleader, and there's many things about his position as pastor that suggest he's a total LARPer. Luke Thompson has been in streams where Paul VanderKlay has named people as leadership personalities in the estuary organization. It is an organization. Paul VanderKlay and his friend John Van Donk are 2 CRCNA pastors who founded the legal status of the estuary organization. Luke Thompson pretends to be an Orthodox convert, and he puts all his time into this whole estuary thing and claims that I was wrong. Paul VanderKlay never did that. He doesn't claim that I'm misinterpreting what's really going on or so on, which is it's not quite a lie to say that. No, he goes to the factual liar level of saying, no, Paul VanderKlay has never promoted anybody. Paul VanderKlay has not done these things. He was in the stream with VanderKlay doing it like a day or 2 before, coming into the comments under one of my videos and making these factual lie statements, in which I confronted. I said, no, you're just lying. This is a cult. I'm a critic of the cult saying the sky is not blue, and you're saying, oh, it's blue, and we're both looking at the same sky. And you're trying to get me to agree to a lie. That's how cults work. So VanderKlay promotes a chaos magic troll who works with the witness intimidation program, gatekeeping. He promotes him. He promotes a left-wing street violence guy. He promotes the other thing about Luke Thompson that makes him part of the little structure there is Thompson is all about relationship, warm fuzzies. He's all about relationship. Well, you want to know a funny thing about that guy? If you really want to have relationships with people, you say thank you when they send you a donation. He was plugging for donations for the estuary, at the point where I wasn't really sure that I was looking at a cult, and I was second-guessing myself. And I thought, Luke Thompson, he comes across as a nice guy. He's all warm and fuzzy. So I sent him a very tiny little donation, nothing to... He never even acknowledged it. He doesn't even bother to have an auto-reply on his GoFundMe. Doesn't even acknowledge it. I had sent emails to several of these people, including him, trying to talk about some of the issues of artificial intelligence and, spiritual consciousness, which I find an interesting topic. And no reply. I finally went into his chat and said, am I, being blocked or something? Is there a reason why I'm getting such an obvious cold shoulder? And on the screen, he picks it up and, oh, no, I am all about relationship. We all need to come together and kumbaya and yeah. Total psychopath right there. Total psychopath. Again, Paul VanderKlay promotes him strongly. Paul VanderKlay, there's someone else he promoted, but that person hasn't shown up lately. But he promotes the attack on children, the tranny attack on children, the pronouns. A lot of people think that's all about gender. No. Pronouns are about destroying a child's ability to use language to refer to himself or to relate to other human beings. It is extreme psychological abuse. Paul VanderKlay was promoting somebody who was not a tranny. I mean, it was really kind of strange. It was really creepy. The guy's obviously a man. Nothing wrong with that. But he's obviously a man, middle-aged man, receding hairline, visible Adam's apple, male demeanor, behavior, male style, but he puts his pronouns, him, he and him, like we got to be told. And Paul VanderKlay puts that on his screen. Paul VanderKlay speaks about being not really welcome in some conservative circles of the CRC because he supports female pastors, which is not Reformation Protestantism at all. So he's a liar to even be in that denomination. And his wife is Rudolf Steiner educator. His family is all in the Rudolf Steiner stuff. Rudolf Steiner is a 19th century theosophist. He was more in the 20th century because he was very active in the 2020s. So basically, he's like the next generation after Helen Blavatsky. Totally anti-Christian. Not only anti-Christian, but full Nazi party. You think I'm exaggerating? Look up Weleda. Weleda is a brand name, and you're going to see all kinds of ads for lotions and creams and skin products, natural medicine. You probably even have seen it in the stores and bought it. Weleda was a company started by Rudolf Steiner, and if you know anything about the German death camps, Dachau, D-A-C-H-A-U, that was the name of one of them. Dachau was known for having a biodynamic farm. That's a Rudolf Steiner farm. They were taking all of Rudolf Steiner's. They were a Waldorf death camp, just like the Waldorf school that Chandra VanderKlay, Paul VanderKlay's wife, is on the teaching staff of. How many people realize that there was a Waldorf death camp? And what the Weleda company has to do with it is when Rudolf Steiner opened that company, they sent like a truckload or several truckloads of creams to the German guards running the camp to test for whether they were protection against cold temperatures. Because there is a thing where, it's a Native American thing. Native Americans up in northern Canada and places like that would use bear fat on their skin to protect themselves against extreme cold. So the Weleda people had the German guards putting prisoners of the Dachau camp out into sub-freezing temperatures with this cream on their skin to see if it worked, if they didn't get frostbite. And if they got frostbite, too bad. Torture. That's Rudolf Steiner. Paul Vanderklay is completely, he's got 1 foot and 4 toes in that world, and he's holding on to the Christian world with his baby toe. And he's putting clearly cult dynamic oriented personalities in leadership positions in Estuary. And they're basically getting inside the personal lives of a lot of young, spiritually concerned, Christian-oriented men. Men who are seeking out some kind of viable church structure in these troubled times. Well, these troubled times, there's going to be more trouble than these cult organizers plan on, because now with the NDA gone, other states are going to follow suit. I don't think it'll be very long before you see at least half a dozen states passing the same law. And the intimidation tactics of the troll crews around the Pizzagate stuff, they're not going to be able to continue. The ICE raids, a lot of them have more to do with child labor than people want to recognize. They've been raiding factories where there have been children who were taken across the border, too young to have consented, who are being put into slave labor. That happened out in California, where Paul Vanderklay, Mark D. Parker, that's their territory. So if I was an old Jewish woman in Germany, and believe me, I've got strong criticisms of the Jewish culture. I do not like genital mutilation of 8-day-old boys. So it's laughable for me to even suggest, but think about it. You ran into somebody my age in the 1930s in Germany, started talking to you about what was going on at Treblinka, Auschwitz, Dachau. See, the Jews were not, that's another complaint I have about the American Jewish community. Their lie. The 6 million Jews killed in those death camps, there were more than twice that many killed. More than half. There were more than 6 million total that they don't want anyone speaking about because they were not Jewish. Back in the 1980s, I was working in nursing homes as an artist. I had all kinds of day jobs. Every time I turned around, I sometimes had 2 jobs together. And I had a patient who had survived Treblinka. I had a neighbor whose husband had survived Auschwitz. And growing up as a child in Webster, Massachusetts, we had next-door neighbors who, I don't know which camps they came out of, but my mother had told us kids to respect them and don't worry about the fact that they were grouchy at us because they had survived the death camps. And all we got was a general explanation of what that meant. And we learned later in high school when we got our World War II history, we learned what it meant. All 4 of those people were not Jewish. They were Polish Catholics. All of them. at least as many that were killed in the death camps were Catholics, as were Jews, and also were many other things. That's not really a point that I care to belabor too much. I'm just pointing it out as a fact. So yeah, I'm very critical of the American Jewish community. But consider the reality of what we're facing here with what Paul VanderKlay is actually doing. He is not a Christian Reformed Protestant. He is the worst kind of wolf in sheep's clothing. And we just won one big victory against the entire pack of wolves that have wrecked our churches of all kinds of denomination. And we're going to continue winning. God bless some, have mercy on some, and to hell with the rest. Denise Matto, over and out.